Hello and welcome to day 5 of our virtual ExCEL Great STEM Campout for kindergarten through 3rd grade. We are so glad to have you with us today. It's a Friday for most of us around here, unless you're on the other side of the world and you've hopped already over. I hope you are ready to get camping again. We have Ranger Carrie and Ranger Annie with us, ready to go. Have fun, guys.
Hello, campers. We are so excited to have you back and welcome to day 5 of the Great STEM Campout. Today is all about survival. And sometimes when people offer a class on something and it's all about that subject, they call it a 101. So today is Survival 101. I'm Ranger Annie, and to refresh your memory, I have short brown hair that comes to my shoulders. I'm wearing a pink t-shirt today. I have white skin, I have on some black glasses, and I have brown eyes. I'm going to turn it over to Ranger Carrie to introduce herself.
Hello, campers. Ranger Carrie here again. To refresh your memory, I have white skin, long black hair, and dark brown eyes. Today I have on my trucker hat again, and it reads, "Love your story" on the front of it. I am so excited to be with you guys today, but also a little sad as this is our final day of the Great STEM Campout. Before we jump into our final day of learning, let's take a minute to review a video from Flipgrid. Hildy did a great job. We're going to share her video. And Addie, we loved getting your pictures. It looks like you have been working so hard on your extension activities. All right, this is just a short video of Hildy showing us her boat.
Hi, I'm Hildy. This is my boat. I had to use tin foil so that it wouldn't get filled up with water.
So in this video, Hildy used the APH Geo Metro kit, which was amazing. She made a boat that was kind of like in an octagon shape. So it was very hard to hear, but she said she had to use tin foil. So she took tin foil or aluminum foil and wrapped it around the bottom of her boat so water wouldn't get in it. That's very important. And you know what? Her boat even floated. She did a great job with her activity. Very good, Hildy.
All right, campers, it's time to hear from you. We're going to use our chat box to get this day started. If you are watching this as a recording, feel free to answer this question as we have reached day 5 of the Great STEM Campout. Okay, so I'm going to give you something that you should be able to do today. This is called an adjective. You can repeat it after me at home to help tell yourself what you'll be able to do. Say, I can conclude. That means to reach a decision. Which campsite I would camp at based on facts about the camping conditions. So what that means is you're going to be able to tell others what campsite you would go to for your camping adventure based on the information you have studied about each campsite this week. We're talking about some national parks, the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone. You also had the option to choose a different destination of your choice that suits your needs as a camper or those preferences we talked about. So now I want to hear from you. What would you recommend as a camping site? Here are the options: Grand Canyon, a G; Yellowstone, a Y; or a different campsite, O for other. You can put a G, a Y, or an O in your chat box now. G stands for Grand Canyon. Would you go there? Y stands for Yellowstone. Would you go there? O stands for other. Would you go to a different site?
Mila chose G for Grand Canyon. Elijah typed a Y for Yellowstone. I bet some other campers are still deciding. Caleb, he chose a Y for Yellowstone.
Let's give it about 10 more seconds to make our decision of where you would go. All right, campers. It was great to hear where you would pick for your campsite now that you know a lot more information than you did on day one. Now let's move on to another campfire story. Oh, Hildegard and Cadence, I see where you would go too. Hildegard would go to Yellowstone and Cadence would go to the Grand Canyon. Speaking of camping, let's hear about Flat Stanley as he goes camping. He's going to tell us how he survived his camping trip because today is all about survival. We're going to hear an audiobook on Flat Stanley. Now, this audiobook comes from YouTube and it is someone reading the book. So it actually does have pictures with it. Not all audiobooks have pictures with them, but Ranger Carrie will stop and be able to tell us about these pictures and what is being shown. I want you to think as you hear the story, how did Flat Stanley survive? I am going to share my screen now. And this is Flat Stanley Goes Camping.
Flat Stanley Goes Camping.
1 second. Let me make sure my audio is much better. I don't think you can hear that.
You can hear it. You're good.
Yeah, it's
Oh, you can? Okay, good. Let me start over. Ranger Carrie, can you tell us what's happening in this picture?
You were not sharing your screen, Ranger Annie.
Oh,
So
no.
we didn't hear anything or see anything.
My technology skills are getting improved this week as I work through these glitches. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. Can you see that?
Yes, if you can just make it full screen.
And then we are going to start over. Here we go.
Flat Stanley Goes Camping. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stanley Lamb Chop lived with his mother, his father, and his little brother Arthur. Stanley was 4 feet tall, about a foot wide, and half an inch thick. He had been flat ever since a bulletin board fell on him. There were lots of good.
Let me go back and Ranger Carrie can describe to you the picture.
Okay, in the first picture, it has his whole family. So his dad is wearing a yellow shirt, blue shorts, and he has a towel around his neck. He's also carrying probably a beach bag, and he has flip-flops on. Stanley has a beach ball in his hand. He has on a red shirt and some swim trunks that are yellow with orange on them. His mom, he has a towel around his neck too. His mom has shorter brown hair. We can't see the color of her swimsuit, but she does have on green shorts and green flip-flops with a towel around her neck. His brother has on white shorts white with blue on them, a white shirt, and a towel around his neck. They are walking toward the pool. The pool's in the background, and his mother is pointing at something. The next picture shows his brother and him in the pool. There is a fence behind the pool. There's a ladder to get down into the pool. And then it looks like there's two little buildings behind them. One is yellow with the number 1, and one is orange with the number 2.
There were lots of good things about being flat. Hurry up, Mom. Stanley could put on sunscreen in one swipe. Stanley had the best back float at the pool.
All right, in this picture, his mom is knelt down on her knees and she is rubbing sunscreen on his brother. He's got his arms in the air. He's making this awful face. Probably the same face some of you guys make when your parents are putting sunscreen on you. Stanley is standing next to him. And remember, Stanley is flat and he is rubbing sunscreen on his stomach. And he has a big smile on his face. In the next picture, his brother is in a inner tube. It's yellow and he's floating. But guess what? Stanley is not in an inner tube. He is just laying on his back with his hands behind his head, relaxing and floating.
Stanley had the loudest belly flop too. Go, Stanley! But sometimes it was hard being the only flat kid in town. Look at him!
So in the first picture, Stanley is doing a belly flop, which means that he's jumping in the water straight on his belly. There is water coming all up around him. His little brother is on the side with his hands in the air, a huge smile on his face, and he was yelling, "Go, Stanley!" In the second picture, Stanley is getting out of the pool by the steps or the ladder, and there's another kid in the pool that is laughing at him. Stanley has a sad look on his face.
I'm sick of being flat, said Stanley one morning. Flat is lame. Lame, said Mrs. Lambchop. Why, some of the best things in the world are flat.
Okay, in this picture, they are all around the kitchen table. His dad is sitting in a chair at the end where he's wearing an orange shirt and like grayish pants, smiling, and he's holding a newspaper and reading it. Stanley is sitting at the table next to his dad. He has on blue and white, probably his pajamas, maybe his outfit. He has his hands on his chin and he has a really sad look on his face. His mom is handing him his breakfast plate. She has on like a teal, light blue, greenish shirt, and she has on a white apron. She must have been cooking. She has a smile on her face, and she appears to be tapping Stanley on the back, showing him that it's okay. His little brother is at the corner of the table, directly across from his dad. He has a plate in front of him with eggs and bacon. He also has a knife in his hand. And his facial expression, he is smiling with his tongue hanging out a little bit, probably telling us that he is really looking forward to eating his food.
Are flat. Like the newspaper, said Mr. Lambchop. And fried eggs and pancakes and bacon, said Arthur.
So in this picture, his dad is sitting at the table still right beside him. He's still reading the newspaper, but he's looking up from the paper like he's looking in the direction of Stanley. Stanley still has his sad look on his face. His hands are still resting underneath his chin. His food is in front of him. And then his brother is showing him, he's still sitting beside him, and he is holding up a piece of bacon on his fork. He's smiling. Stanley still looks sad.
I guess so, said Stanley. After breakfast, Mr. Lambchop started loading up the car with tents and sleeping bags. It'll be fun. What's going on? Asked Arthur. We're going camping, said Mrs. Lambchop. This family needs some fresh air. All right, yelled Arthur. Stanley barely smiled.
So in this picture, they are outside now. They have a blue car with 4 doors. On top of the car, there are lots of rolled up sleeping bags and possibly tents. Stanley's dad is standing next to the car and he is tying down those sleeping bags and tents on top of the hood of their car. So at the very top of the car. His brother Arthur is standing behind Stanley and he is jumping up and down with a huge smile on his face. Stanley is standing there with a red shirt on and blue jeans, his hands down to his side, and he looks very sad. His mom is standing in front of Stanley. She has on a yellow outfit, a sleeping bag in her hand, and she has a big smile on her face.
After a short drive, the Lambchops arrived at the Roaring River Campground. Stanley was helpful as usual. He helped carry firewood. Stanley blocked the wind so his mother could start a fire.
Oh goodness, this is a funny picture. So they are now at the campground. There is a stream of water behind them and they are standing on a dirt trail. His dad is standing and Stanley is laying out flat, and his dad and his brother Arthur are holding him. His dad has a hold of his feet and Arthur has a hold of his arms. Stanley has logs on top of him, the firewood. So they're kind of using him as a table. In the next picture, Stanley's mom and Stanley are bent down in front of a fire as they start to light it. And Stanley has a smile on his face and so does his mom.
Perfect. But Stanley just wasn't himself. He wouldn't even eat any toast. Delicious. Too flat, he muttered. Cheer up, Stanley.
All right, in this picture, they are still at the campground. They are sitting on 2 big logs around the fire. There is a tent in the background behind them. Arthur and Stanley's dad are sitting on a log together. Arthur has a piece of toast and he is spreading jam, which is red on it. It's probably my favorite, strawberry jam. Arthur's dad has a stick that he's holding into the fire. On the other log is Stanley and his mother. Stanley has a piece of toast hooked onto a stick and he's holding it over the fire. He has one hand underneath his chin again and he does not look happy. His mom is sitting beside him. She has her arms crossed and she is looking directly at Stanley.
Why don't you two go exploring? Suggested Mr. Lambchop. Good idea, said Mrs. Lambchop. Just don't get lost.
All right, in this picture, his mother is standing there with her finger right below her mouth, which indicates that she's thinking. There's a thought bubble above her head. And in that thought bubble is an image of Stanley and his brother. And behind them are 2 trees with faces on them. The trees have eyes and a mouth, and their mouth is open wide, and their eyes are slanted upward in a scary type of direction.
Or fall off a cliff. Or touch any poison ivy.
So in this picture, it shows Stanley. It looks like it's another thought bubble, and it shows a cliff with a little bit of grass, and Stanley that's Arthur. Arthur is falling off backwards. He's falling back with his back towards the ground and his hands are wide spread out and he has a very concerned look on his face. In the next thought bubble, it's Stanley. He is touching a tree that has poison ivy on it and he has a very worried look on his face.
Or touch any poison ivy. Have fun, dears. Stanley and Arthur set out. Hey, animal tracks, said Arthur. Let's follow them. The boys followed the tracks along the river, through some trees, and up a steep hill with a cliff on one side.
In this picture, the boys are on a trail. There is a stream of water behind them and lots of trees. Some of those trees even look like Christmas trees. His brother is pointing to the ground and Stanley has his finger up by his mouth, just like his mom did. And he is thinking, on the ground are a bunch of footprints and they're going up the trail.
The tracks end here, said Arthur. He peered over the cliff. I wonder what kind of animal made them. Arthur, said Stanley. Arthur turned around.
So in this picture, they're still on the trail, but they're a little bit higher up in the air now. They're both looking down and there is water below them. To the side, there is a bird flying toward them. Arthur looks pretty excited. He has a smile on his face. Stanley still looks a little unsure.
Arthur turned around. Skunk, Stanley whispered. Let's get out of here. But the boys were trapped. Uh-oh. The skunk was on one side. The cliff was on the other. Then the skunk raised its tail.
Oh no. So in this picture, the boys are standing on the cliff. The water is still below them. Arthur has his hands up in the air like, oh no. He has a very worried look on his face. Stanley has a worried look on his face as well. There is a skunk a little bit ahead of them. The skunk is black and white. He's looking at the two boys and he has his tail straight up in the air.
What do we do? Arthur wailed. We're stuck.
Oh no. So this picture, Stanley has his hand over his nose. Arthur is plugging his nose. The skunk is still looking back at the two boys. His tail is still in the air.
Mom said not to fall off a cliff, said Stanley. She didn't say not to jump off.
So in this picture, it kind of looks like a little small thought bubble. Arthur is standing there with a big smile on his face. One of his hands is on his hip and the other hand is pointing up in the air like, I have an idea.
Suddenly, Stanley grabbed Arthur by both hands and jumped. Ah! Arthur screamed. Stanley!
Oh no, I bet you can guess. They are falling in the air. The cliff is behind them. They're slightly below the cliff, which means you're right, they jumped. The skunk is still standing on the cliff. He's looking over the cliff at the two boys. Arthur and Stanley are both holding hands. Their bodies are out flat and their face is looking toward the ground.
Then Arthur opened his eyes. He wasn't falling. He was sailing. It's like flying. Above him, Stanley's body made the perfect parachute.
So in this picture, the boys are still in the air. You can see the cliff with some trees in the background. Behind them is the blue sky with white clouds. Arthur is at the bottom. He's holding on to Stanley, who is directly above him. He's looking up at Stanley, I'm sorry, with a smile on his face. Stanley is holding Arthur's hands. He's looking down at Arthur and he has a smile. They are making the shape of a parachute.
The boys landed with a gentle plop. That was awesome, said Arthur. Thanks, said Stanley. Now, where are we? Arthur and Stanley looked around. All they saw were trees and a sign that says, "Beware poison ivy." Oh, no. We're lost, said Arthur, and it's getting dark.
So in the first picture, the two boys are Arthur is sitting on the ground. He's still holding on to Stanley, and he has landed on his bottom in a pile of leaves. They both have huge smiles on their face. Stanley is standing right above Arthur. In the second picture, they're standing in the middle of the woods. You can see the tall trees, the trunks of the trees behind them, and you can see a bunch of green bushes in front of them. Arthur has his hands out to the side and a very concerned look on his face. Stanley has his hands on his hip. He also has a concerned look on his face. And there's a sign posted on one of the trees behind them that says, "Beware of poison ivy."
So we're going to stop the story there today because Flat Stanley worked on surviving in the wilderness. So he used his body to help Arthur fly through the sky like they were parasailing. And then, even though they had survived that, they landed in poison ivy. I would say they're going to be itchy tonight. We're going to stop the story there because we want to have time to hear from you and how you would survive your trip in the wilderness. I'm going to turn it over to Ranger Carrie to give you some ranger tips on survival.
All right, guys. I don't know about you, but I love Flat Stanley books. And I know you guys are dying to see what happened in the rest of that story. That story is on YouTube and it's completely free. So if you guys have time later today or anytime, ask your parents if they can find you and you can listen to the rest of that story. So we've had a ton of fun this week learning about camping, but we saved one of the most important things for our last day, camping safety. While being outdoors is always fun and we must know what to do to keep ourselves safe, we still have to be safe so we can have fun. And I'll tell you a little secret. They talked about poison ivy in this book. My husband has poison ivy right now because he was out in the woods and was not completely safe or protected. Our whole group lesson is all about protecting the park and yourself. I'm first going to share with you some safety tips from the national parks that we have talked about this week. These have been created for us, and guess what? You guys are going to get to work with Ranger Annie and myself in just a little bit, and we're going to create our very own survival guide that you guys can share with your friends and your family. All right, so first let's talk about the Yellowstone National Park. The first thing that we want to know if we visit there is never approach wildlife. The animals in Yellowstone are wild and they can be unpredictable. No matter how calm they appear to be, the safest and often best view of wildlife is from inside a car. You always want to stay at least 100 yards away from bears and wolves. I would stay further than that if I was camping. And at least 25 yards away from all other animals, including bison and elk. Stay on boardwalks and trails in thermal areas. Most of the time, the parks have maps that are laid out, and it will show you where you can be and where you cannot be. So it's important to make sure you stay on trails. Hot springs have injured more people in Yellowstone than any other natural feature. So it's very important to be safe and stay away from them. Never feed wildlife. Animals that become dependent on human food may become aggressive toward people. Keep all food, garbage, and other smelly items packed away when not in use. If you guys live anywhere near lakes or ponds and they have ducks or geese there, that's what it makes me think about when it says do not feed them. We have a lake very close to us that a lot of people go to have picnics. And there are these geese there that are very aggressive because people have been feeding them. Never park in the road or block traffic. Use pullouts to watch wildlife and let other cars pass by. Stay with your vehicle if you encounter a wildlife jam. All right, now let's talk about the safety at the Grand Canyon. I want you guys to think about if you hear anything that is similar between the two. Stay on designated trails and walkways and always keep a safe distance if at least 6 feet from the edge of the rim. Know where the edge is, watch foot placement, and look for trip hazards. In areas where there is a railing or a fence, do not climb over the barrier. Do not run, jump, or perform physical stunts when near the rim. That's for your safety because they don't want anybody to fall off of the edge. Never throw rocks, coins, trash, or anything else over the edge. Objects tossed over the edge or dislodged by walking off the trail can injure hikers and wildlife below or start landslides. Excuse me. So those are some basic rules for Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon. We also have some basic rules that you guys can use for all campsites. Here's one that's really important, and we have talked about how it's really important for you guys, especially if you're in a hot area. Use sunblock and reapply it during the day. Stay hydrated by drinking water or electrolyte drinks. An example of an electrolyte drink would be Gatorade, Powerade. Take your time while visiting overlooks and hiking. Rest often in the shade. The national parks belong to everybody. Please leave everything where you find it, including rocks, plants, firewood, and artifacts. And I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I'll go ahead and tell you again. Most campsites offer a map available in a variety of formats, including Braille, audio description, and text only. This is important to remember so you do not get lost while having a fun camping experience. All right. So another common thing that you might see around campsites are signs. We're going to discuss a few of the most common signs so you'll be prepared on your next camping trip. These signs are normally large and very similar to signs you may see on the road. Most of these signs don't have any words. It just has a picture or a symbol. Sometimes those pictures or symbols are hard to figure out what they mean. Ranger Annie, can you please go ahead and share your screen so I can talk about the different types of signs?
Absolutely. Here they are.
Okay, so the first picture on the screen is the sign, and this one means that you can have tents in that area. So this sign has a triangle, and then at the bottom, the line at the bottom goes a little bit longer, but this would indicate that you are allowed to camp in tents in that area. The next sign, you guys have probably seen these everywhere, but it's really important. So on the left of the screen, there is a stick figure that represents a man or a boy. And on the right side is a woman. They look very similar, but the woman's stick figure, she has what would look like a dress. This is going to indicate men's bathroom and women's bathroom, or girls and boys. This is very important because you do not want to go into the wrong bathroom. This one is also very important. So this symbol or picture, it's kind of one of those stick figures again. Their arms are stretched out to the side and a piece of paper is falling from them. And it's going into a trash can. This would indicate that you need to throw away your trash, or that trash can is located here. Remember, most of these signs should have Braille on them, So if you're a Braille reader, remember to read the Braille. Now this sign, it looks like an A where people have went past the lines when they're drawing an uppercase A. This sign is actually a sign that would indicate there's a picnic area around. This would be important so you guys would know where you could take your food and eat. This one is also a very important one. This is a picture of, it kind of represents that you're allowed to build a campfire in this area. So it shows flames, it shows what would be wood, and then there's a little border at the bottom that would probably indicate the stone so they can contain the fire. Now this one, this would be my favorite if I was camping because I love to hike. So this would indicate that there's hiking or trails nearby. This one is another picture of the stick figure. They have him in a walking position. He is holding on to a stick or a walking stick, and he also has a backpack on the back of him. So again, this one would be telling you that hiking or trails are nearby. This one's important too. This one you might see at a lot of places if you're near water. So when you guys are near water with camping, there's going to be some locations that you're allowed to swim in and some of those that are not, that are off limits. So this one I thought was really important. It is another picture of that stick figure-ish person. He's got his hand above his head like he's swimming. But the big thing about this that's really important is there's a big red circle with a line through it. And that red circle, anytime you see that on any picture, that means that it is not allowed. So this picture or symbol would mean that there is no swimming allowed at that spot. Now this one I kind of like too. So this is a big yellow sign. It does have words on it. And on the left, there's a picture of a deer. On the right, I feel like it's an elk or a bison, but my wildlife could be a little bit off on that. But it says, slow down, wildlife crossing. I feel like this is important for two reasons. If you're hiking or walking and this is near a trail, that would indicate to you that there could be wild animal there. But also if you're driving, if your parents are driving and they come across one of these signs, more than likely you may see animals crossing the road. So it's telling you to drive slow. All right. So I'm going to turn it back over to, to Ranger Annie. She is going to tell you guys or allow you guys to speak to us so we can come up with a survival guide that you guys participate in.
So today we want to give you plenty of time to share what you have learned this week. And we want to apply this knowledge to figure out how you would go camping and what you would advise to future campers if you were teaching them about camping. So today I want you to be able to apply what you have learned about camping and make suggestions for future campers. How would you apply what you have learned this week to make suggestions for campers going to a campsite of your choice? Let's use some questions to help us talk about things we've learned about camping. Ranger Carrie pointed out a very important thing, safety. We want to hear safety tips from you. What have you heard this week that would keep others safe at your campsite of your choice? Some of you said you would go to the Grand Canyon. Some of you said you would go to Yellowstone. If you're watching this as a recording, we want to know as well, what would you give as safety feedback to others who are going to go camping at your campsite? So I want you to think about the weather conditions. I want you to think about the wildlife there. Think about what keeps you safe at your campsite. If you have thought about this and you have an answer or a safety tip to share with us, you may raise your hand. We will call on a couple of people for each topic so that we can make a survival list. Hildy, we're ready to hear from you.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. A safety tip. Let's see. It was. You can get a new car, just stay away from the rains or storms. Good. And
I love that.
that you would need to stay away from wild animals.
Okay, so your car provides you a lot of protection, doesn't it, in different situations? We're talking about the weather and the wildlife. Hildy, I love that you shared that today. And I will tell you, it is very stormy in Kentucky today. There's thunder, there's lightning, there's rain. And I stayed in my car not long ago whenever I was trying to decide when can I go back into my house. But it wasn't safe because it was thundering and lightning. So I had to wait it out. That is a great tip to give to others when camping because they are especially spending more time outside. And as we have seen, there is a variety of weather at our camp sites. So thank you, Hildy, for sharing that. We will take one more safety tip and then we will move on. Do you have a safety tip to share with us? Raise your hand if you do.
Cadence has her hand raised.
All right, Cadence, we're ready to hear your safety tip.
This is not, I don't think this is surviving. Is this really the last day of the week or just last day? Like leaving?
Can you say it one more time for us, Cadence? We aren't able to hear you.
Is this the last day? Or is this the last day of the week?
Rainy day?
Yeah, they asked if it was the last day. This is the last day for this
Yes.
camp. It's a 1-week camp and this is day 5.
This is day 5. Do you have a survival tip that you have taken away this week from camp?
I don't know anything.
I tell you what, let's move on to weather. And Cadence, you can be the first to share with us about weather. I want to know, would you go during the summer months camping or would you go during the winter months? What would you suggest to future campers? Summer or winter?
I'd probably go in the summer.
Okay, so she says she would go during the summertime for camping. Let's have another camper share. Campers, what would you suggest to future campers for weather protection? I might be talking about something you could wear or a certain time of year you could go. What is a tip you would give for weather protection while camping?
Elijah still has their name up, so I'll go ahead and give them permission.
We're ready to hear from you, Elijah.
Elijah, you're going to need to unmute yourself.
Okay. I would camp in the summer.
You would? And why is that, Elijah?
Because maybe the coldness maybe just gets my hands all cold.
Okay, so if you're camping in the summertime, what kind of clothes do you suggest that future campers would bring for a summer campsite?
Maybe shorts and underwear and a shirt and socks.
Socks. I like how you mentioned socks too. What kind of pajamas do you suggest they bring? Because what if it gets colder at night, even though it's summertime?
Maybe fuzzy pajamas that you can zip up to help you get warm.
What a great suggestion. And having a zipper offers a different type of versatile outfit if they're going to put it on over their t-shirt, and they can switch from that warmer to cooler weather. All right, let's look at who else's hand is raised. Let me give this tip, or let me give this topic, and then you can share with us if you raised your hand. Do you have a suggestion for how to prepare food outside? Remember, we're not talking about with electricity. You would have to use either a campfire, or you would have to bring a meal that is easy to prepare and doesn't need heat. Do you have a suggestion for eating while camping? Mila, I see your hand. We're ready to hear from you.
Cereal for the breakfast and sandwiches for lunch.
Oh, yum. Cereal for breakfast and sandwiches for lunch. I think this is great advice for people who are camping and for future campers, because everybody seems to like cereal and sandwiches. Those are common things that you can eat. Now, what kind of sandwich would you make outside, Mila?
Peanut butter and jelly.
Okay, so you wouldn't have to have that refrigerator, would you?
No.
No, so that's an easy meal. Does anyone else have a meal that they would suggest for camping and how to prepare it? Ranger Carrie is going to share later a meal that you can make while camping. It's more like a snack or a dessert, but I think it is going to be a crowd favorite, and it does not require a campfire. But remember, if you are going to bring food that requires a campfire, you would have to have a cooler to keep that food safe from expiring before you cook it. Hildegard, I see your hand raised. Would you like to share with us a food prep tip?
Yes. I would have peanut butter and jelly are my favorite veggie sandwiches.
Ooh, veggie sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly. I like the way you're thinking, because you're trying to think, what foods could we take outside and stay safe while camping and not eating something that has spoiled if we don't have the way to prepare it or we don't have the way to refrigerate it. All right, let's talk about something really important that we have worked on this week together to really think about what skills we need as learners with visual impairments to touch on in order to prepare us for camping. I'm talking about the Expanded Core Curriculum, the ECC. There is an area of the Expanded Core Curriculum I wanted to talk to you about today. It's called compensatory access. I know that this sounds like some fancy words. We use the word fancy when we're talking about those big words, but compensatory access allows us to be able to do something in an environment. So when we go camping, what are some things we might need as a learner or as a person with a visual impairment to allow us to do the things we want to do while we're camping? For instance, when we heard Zeke's story this week, we heard that Zeke was going to bring his cane. Now, he didn't know if he could always rely on his cane, so he was also going to use a human guide. What are some suggestions you would make for others with visual impairments to go camping that they might want to bring to use?
Hildy has her hand raised.
Okay, Hildy.
Mommy! Mommy! They called me again.
Hmm?
They called down to me again.
Okay.
Hildy, do you have some equipment or a tool you might bring to help you with your visual impairment while camping?
I would bring a guide dog, a cane, and a human guide.
a human guide. That is a great one.
A cane, a
Oh,
seeing eye dog, and a human guide.
okay, so she says a cane, a seeing eye dog, and a human guide. And these are 3 things that would give her access to a camping environment. That's called compensatory access. That's also her self-determination because she knows what she needs to go camping. I will take one more share if we have anyone. What is something as a person with a visual impairment you might bring to help you go camping?
I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
All right. Well, I do appreciate all that you have shared with us today and all these survival techniques. I am going to turn it over to Ranger Carrie to conclude our camp for today and to tell you about a snack that you could make at home that does not need refrigeration or a campfire.
All right, campers, if you guys can hang with me for just 1 second, I do want to show you guys what you guys just created. So while you were busy giving us your answers, I was busy typing those in so you guys could see your hard work. Well, here we go. So I made a little chart for you guys, and you guys came up with these. I may have added 1 or 2, but most of this was your work. So the first one says safety. Stay away from wild animals. Here's a big one. Stay with your family or friends. It's never a good idea to go off in the wild when you're camping by yourself. For the weather, wear sunblock, wear warm clothes in the winter, wear shorts and t-shirts and a t-shirt during the summer. Whoops. For food, cereal for breakfast and sandwiches for lunch. Here's another important one. Make sure you throw your food away. We do not want any special visitors coming to your camp area. And you may need a cooler for food. Items to bring: a cane, a human guide, and a seeing eye dog. Something else that I thought of, some of you guys would probably love to bring your monocular if you have one, because you could see things really far out in the distance, or a magnifier. I love using a magnifier to look at things like leaves, any kind of sticks. You can see, sometimes you can pick up a rock and put your magnifier on there and you might see little bitty tiny bugs that nobody else could see. So something to think about. You guys did awesome with that. Okay. So, do you think they're ready for our fun activity we have planned today?
I sure do. They
Okay.
sounded ready by their responses.
Okay, so today we talked about safety tips that are helpful for both Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon. And we also just discussed basic safety tips. And like I said, you guys did an awesome job of sharing those. I challenge you to talk to somebody, either a family or a friend, and tell them all about the things that you learned this week. We have to do one more thing before I get to our extension activity. Ranger Annie, if you don't care to share the screen so we can go over the rating scale, this is our last and final rating scale of this week.
Let's see how you did today.
All right. You guys probably know these by heart. If you totally got what we talked about today and you could teach it to others, please put a 3 in the chat box. If you still need a little more practice or more explaining, put a 2 in the chat box. And if you were lost today and you need a lot of help, put a 1 in the chat box.
I am seeing our 3s and our 2s come through. So I do want to say, if you ever feel like there was something that you missed during this camp, these are now recorded videos. So you can go to YouTube and you can watch these. These are being shared to an email that you signed up with so that you have the link to them. And if you're watching these as a recording and you're joining us on day 5, Don't forget to go back and watch day 1, day 2, day 3, and day 4.
Okay, we are ready for our STEM. And let me tell you, we saved the best for last. So today we've been talking all about science, technology, engineering, and math. But today you're going to get to do a cooking activity. But here's the cool thing. You don't need a microwave, you don't need an oven, you don't need a stove. All you need are some simple ingredients and just to be able to follow the recipe. So this one is called s'mores trail mix, or sometimes I call it s'mores in a bag. And I have some over here. With me. Let me tell
That
you
looks
what's in
yummy.
here. It's kind of not working the best on my camera. So inside here, you guys are going to get an extension activity later today. And it's going to have measurements and it's going to have step-by-step directions, which is what a recipe is. If you guys can follow this recipe, this is the first step to becoming an independent cooker, as I like to call it. You guys are still young, but anytime you can help out in the kitchen or ask your parents if you can help, that's an amazing thing to do, because the more you learn, the more you'll be able to do it when you get older. So for this one, you need like a graham cracker cereal. You need marshmallows and chocolate chips, and that is all. And the cool thing about this is you can share it with anybody and you can take it on the road with you. It's easy to make in a big bowl or a big bag, and then you can separate it. All right, campers, Ranger Annie and myself had a wonderful week with each of you. We have loved seeing how much you have learned and your excitement each day. You guys have totally rocked this camp out of the water. So in our eyes, this isn't a goodbye, but it's a see you later. Remember, you guys are capable of anything you set your mind to. Keep working hard and continue to reach for the stars. We're talking to you if you're watching this as a recording also. We had a fabulous time with you this week.
We'll see you later, campers. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
This is Leanne, and I want to say thank you to Ranger Annie and Ranger Carrie. I'm going to give them a round of applause. I'm taking my hands and I'm clapping and I'm moving my hands in a circle shape. Hopefully you're doing the same thing for both of them. I'm going to send out your extension activity, and I'm going to send you out a link in case you would like to join one of our other camps. Who knows? Maybe Ranger Carrie and Ranger Annie might jump on just to see if you've joined in. Thank you all so much.
Bye. See you next time.